Do you have questions about your water softener? You know, some aspect about how it works, how to maintain, how to install. Can you even install one yourself? Maybe you just want to have some troubleshooting questions, or maybe you just want to know if a water softener is right for your family or not. Well, I'm going to be going through it all starting right now. Hi, I'm Gary the Water Guy, and I simplify water filtration to help you conquer crappy water for your family. And welcome to my live stream here. So this live stream is perfect for you if you've got some questions about water softeners, any aspect of water softeners. That's what we're doing today, water softener Q&A. And maybe you're just thinking about investing in a water softener for your family in the future. Don't worry, we're going to be covering all of that. Everything about, like I say, how it works, how to install, how to maintain, and even, you know, how a water softener can save your family money. And I'll be sharing common questions that we get all the time about water softeners in case some of those questions aren't raised this evening. So again, you got lots of information. And throughout this whole live stream, I'll be sharing with you all the tips and tricks that I've learned over 20 years in the water filtration industry, out there every day doing service work and helping folks and families just like yours fix their water. So, and I definitely encourage you to watch this video right to the end, because like I say, throughout there'll be all kinds of different information about all kinds of different aspects of water softeners, questions that you never even thought of. And again, I hope you're going to add your questions into the bunch and during this live stream. And of course, now, whether you're watching this live or the replay, you're definitely welcome here. And the beauty of the replay, of course, is that you can watch the information that was presented here. What that guy say, you know, about that, you can always check back anytime on my YouTube channel, GaryTheWaterGuy.com. And like I say, the replay, I'll have lots of information. And in the description down below, if you haven't noticed already, there's lots of links to a lot of, I'll be talking about different videos that I've made that talks about different aspects of water softeners. I'll be referring to them throughout this live stream. And like I say, the links are in the description down below. So if you're not sure where they are. And I flashed a poll up on the screen. I started it a little bit earlier. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. Yeah, here you can see the poll that I flashed on the screen. I don't know why the emojis aren't in color here all of a sudden, but these are the questions that we're asking during the live stream. What are you hoping to get from it today, so that I can kind of tailor it toward what you're looking for? How water softeners work, how and where to install, how to maintain and troubleshoot, and how to repair. And so we've been getting some information from you folks already, and I've had 6 votes so far. Come on, guys, let's get in there and vote. But 67 of the votes are about maintenance. So yeah, so obviously that's a lot what you folks are interested in, and we'll definitely have a look at that. And I did a poll ahead of time. Actually, I'll show you what I'm talking about there on my community tab. And we had, I guess as of this morning, this screenshot was from a little bit earlier, we had almost 30 votes on there. And again, the maintenance was the big one. You folks definitely are looking at maintenance, and we've got a lot of do-it-yourselfers on here today. And that's great. So, like I say, during this live stream, you'll see something like this on the screen right now, if you look, and that's where the poll is on the right-hand side, and you just post your questions at the bottom on the right-hand side. So that's great. And I know we've got a bunch of questions here already, so let's dive right in and then go from there. So first one is from Bravo Peters. Welcome. Why do I seem to go through so much salt? It's only me in the household and I don't use that much water. Maybe it's running through regeneration cycle too often. Yeah, definitely it's running through the regeneration cycle too often. Now, if you have a metered, 2 things determine how much salt you're going to use. 1 is how hard your water is, and 2 is how much water you use. But those settings have to be in your water softener correctly. So if the water softener is just set on the default settings, then it's going to go too often. So you need to go through that settings. And again, I don't know if you've got a clack type water softener or a different kind of water softener, but I've got a great YouTube video that talks about programming and about doing the settings. So I'll give you some examples from the clack water softeners. Is you need to put in the right hardness. So you need to have your water tested to find out how hard it is, and you need to program that in. The other thing you need to think about is if it's a metered water softener, in other words, it regenerates based on your water usage, that there's not something like a toilet running or something like that that's skewing your information. The other thing, you have to make sure it has a day's override with metered water softener. So in other words, if you haven't used up its capacity within the correct number is 14 days, it'll go automatically. But sometimes I've seen people or plumbers or someone set that to a day's override of 3. So that means it's going to regenerate every 3 days if you used up its capacity or not. So you definitely need to check that out. And of course the hardness numbers. The other thing is you need to tell the valve how big of a water softener it's sitting on. If that hasn't been programmed properly, that's going to be a problem. So definitely I'd check a couple things. One, I check to find out that you don't have some water being used somewhere that you don't think it's being used, like a toilet running, for example. 2, you need to make sure that the settings are correct in the water softener, and then go through that whole process to make sure that's happening. And I think you're going to find the solution in there. But thanks for the question. That was great. And got a comment here from Mary, and she's saying going through 600 gallons of water in one day. So if you're going through 600 gallons of water in one day, you better have something like 9 people living there. Because if you don't, then something's wrong. Something just isn't working out correctly there for you. And actually, I should go back to the question from Bravo Peters. The other thing is, what I didn't talk about was if you're on time clock water softener. In other words, it's programmed to regenerate based not on usage, but based on a certain number of days, or 3 or 4 days. If that calculation wasn't done correctly, then it's set up incorrectly. So it all boils down to the settings in the water softener. But thanks for your question or your comment, Mary. That's great. And Bravo Peters added a little bit more, not even close. Yeah, so I'm sure one person wouldn't use 600 gallons of water in a day. That's definitely not going to happen. And I got a question here from Ken Wilson. Welcome, Ken. Oh, what happened there? Where'd it go? Ken. I have a 120-foot deep well. I have a softener and iron removal system. Okay, great. And I have a drilled well. Oh, it's not lasting very long there. Sorry about that comment. Yeah, drilled well, and I have a water softener iron removal. After softener runs cycle, I get rust water out of the tap, but not for long. Usually that's a sign that the iron filter isn't set to backwash long enough after it's gone through the regeneration. That's one thing that it could be. So with most iron filters, if they're an air over media type iron filter, in other words, the kind that suck in air through the top, they typically need 30 minutes to do the air draw and the rinse. So, and usually 15-minute backwash. So I would definitely check those times. The other thing I would also check is that the iron filter is before the water softener, not after. And if that's the case, then you could always increase the backwash time on the water softener to get rid of that brown water that you're getting. And the third thing to check is to make sure that the water softener and the iron filter don't go through the regeneration cycle at the same time. So typically, the default regeneration time for a water softener is 2 a.m. So what I normally do is when I set them up, I set up, assuming you're not working shifts or something like that, what I normally do is set up the iron filter to go at 1 a.m. It takes 45 minutes, so it's long done before the water softener goes at 2 a.m. And of course that only happens on the days when they happen to coincide to regenerate at the same time. But thanks for that question, Ken. And I've got a question here from JB. Welcome, JB. How often should I clean out my clack water softener to prevent it from building up a dam at the bottom, which may prevent performance? Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I recommend, first of all, there's some ways that you can kind of avoid that dam, right, just in terms of how you maintain your water softener. And one thing I recommend is once a year, run out of salt. I know that sounds sacrilege, but yeah, you should really do that. Once a year, run out of salt. And that'll make sure that you're right down to the bottom of that brine tank, and you've used up all the salt. That's the best way. Number 2 is whenever you add salt, before you add salt, stir up whatever salt is in there, and then add the salt. How often should you clean out the brine tank? You know, I've cleaned out brine tanks for folks after, you know, that they have a total salt clog in the bottom. Sometimes as short as 4 years if they're horribly, if they totally do it wrong. In other words, they keep way too much salt in there and there's hardly any water usage, or it's a cottage or a cabin where there's hardly anybody ever there. That's sort of the worst case scenario for getting that salt clog. So I've done that after 3 or 4 years in a few isolated cases. Sometimes it's 10 or 15 years, something like that. So it really depends on the circumstances. But set yourself a goal to once a year, starting, if you haven't done it for more than a year or two, start right now. Run out of salt, and then start fresh from there. And that's your best preventative maintenance when it comes to that. And JB is saying, what are your recommendations for keeping my clack water softener and clack iron removal in tip-top shape? Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to be touching on that throughout the presentation today. So one thing is about using media cleaner, Res Care, or if you have iron in your water, well, you got an iron filter, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you have iron in your water and you're using the water softener to get rid of the iron, use Rust Out once a year, something like that. Injectors are really important, especially for the iron filter, that those injectors are cleaned or replaced. I mean, they're not expensive. They're under $20 or around $20, I think, with shipping. So they're really easy to replace. And again, I got some great YouTube videos on that. And again, they're all in the description down below, so you definitely check that out. So like I say, injectors, running out of salt once a year, using Res Care or a media cleaner, something like that, once a year. Yeah, that's it. Oh, and a surge suppressor. So this is, what's a surge suppressor, Gary? One of these babies. So one of these things that you plug an expensive TV into or a computer into to protect the electronics. Well, the same goes for the water softeners, iron filters, and stuff like that. We've had a lot of, in our area here, we've had a lot of brownouts and power fluctuations, and we've replaced a fair amount of circuit boards lately because of that. And circuit boards not only in water softeners and iron filters, but UV systems too. And they're expensive, you know, $200–300 for a circuit board, something like that. Surge suppressor, I buy them on sale. You can get them from Amazon, whatever. Usually about $25–30 gets you a good one, and a super cheap insurance. But thanks for your question, JB. I really appreciate it. Got a question here from Chadwick. My softener went to E1. Just kept running, so I unplugged it, and it was not done, so since I don't know why. Weird. So it depends what kind of water softener you have, but E1 in a lot of water softeners, like Water Boss or Aquamaster or Hague water softeners, usually means that the piston is stuck. It's not moving anymore. So what's happened is the water softener hasn't finished its cycle and it's returned home and it's stuck in a cycle. That's why sometimes you just have water just keeps running to drain, or water keeps running to fill up the brine tank, or whatever it's doing just keeps on doing it. Of course, when you unplug it, it's just going to keep on doing it the same. So what you need to do is put it into bypass to shut it off so it stops using all that water. So I would check, I don't know what brand of water softener you have, but I would definitely check and see what you have. You know, my thoughts are definitely you got a stuck piston going on there. So that's what I would definitely look into. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later through this whole thing. I've got Sandy Water saying hi. Hi, Sandy. I appreciate you saying hi. And by the way, folks, whenever you add your comments and your questions, don't be afraid to put in there where you're from. I mean, we've had folks here from Ireland. We've had folks from all over the US and Canada. We had someone from Great Britain a while ago, the UK, I guess. And so please let us know. Everybody finds that pretty interesting. Evan S. I have an iron filter with K-locks and size 2.5. After the water softener, I have 0.5 parts per million of iron. I have a pH of 7 and 15 gallons per minute flow rate. Do I have iron bacteria? So what you've just told me is some great information, but none of that information tells me if you have iron bacteria or not. Iron bacteria, you can see it as slime. It'll be typically slime at the water line in a toilet. Sometimes it's pink, sometimes it's the color of iron, rusty iron. That's where you see it. Another good place to check is if you take the water closet off the back of the lid off the water closet, and if at the top of it you see slime floating on there, that tells you have iron bacteria. In terms of how much iron you have and those other factors that you have, that's all great information, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't tell me if you have iron bacteria or not. How do you get rid of iron bacteria? You need a chemical injection type system, like a chlorine type injection system to go into your water. Unfortunately, an FOK or I think you said a K-locks, yeah, that's an FOK. that won't get rid of iron bacteria. But look for the slime, that'll tell you. Or you can have a lab tested for iron bacteria. But great question, thank you for that. And Sandy, what's wrong? I found resin in my salt brine. Clack WSN water softener. Can't say I've ever seen that happen before. Are you sure it's not dirt? Often when water softeners have been, folks have been using a very impure kind of salt, like a rock salt, or you know, a salt that has impurities on it. I know the Culligan salt they sold for years had impurities of it. So of course what happens is the water goes in, it absorbs the salt to make brine, but it leaves the dirt behind, and then you see dirt. If you're actually getting resin in there, that tells you something has let go inside your tank, and you probably were getting resin down the drain line too. So probably the resin is dropping inside your media tank, and it's definitely a sign that you're going to have to rebuild the inside of that tank, or you're going to have to replace the whole water softener. But if you're looking for information about replacing the resin, again, I got a great YouTube video in the description down below where I actually show doing the one in my house. And so you can check that out. There'll be a lot of great information there that'll help you with that. But thanks for the question, Sandy. Got a question here from Evan S. I have 9 parts per million of iron in my well. Yeah, so that's a lot of iron. And that would explain why you've got a 2.5 cubic foot Catalox filter. But that doesn't, again, determine whether you've got iron bacteria or not. Look for the slime. The slime is what's going to tell you if you have iron bacteria or not. And Kenny Beal. Hi, Kenny. Thanks for doing this. Will an iron filter reduce hardness? No, Kenny, it won't. Only a water softener. That's the only thing that's going to reduce hardness. So 2 different things, 2 different technologies. Iron filter gets rid of iron and will oxidize sulfur out of the water because it uses air to oxidize that iron. Water softener softens the water. It's one of those things, you know, that the only thing that'll soften water is a water softener. I mean, reverse osmosis will also soften water, but then you're going to run into a big maintenance issue if you try softening your water with just a reverse osmosis system. Typically, they require soft water going into them. But thanks for the question, Kenny. And thanks for joining us tonight. Bravo Peters. There you go. My spin down filter is orange, so there's surely iron in the water. Yep, I agree with you. I think I may invest in an iron filter. And you may need one, but you may not. And the reason I say that is because a water softener will get rid of 1.0 parts per million of iron. So I always, you know, we get questions all the time. We get folks all the time saying, I've got iron, I've got this, what do I need? And and we make recommendations all the time to folks, but there's certain pieces of information that we need. And so what we do is when you contact us, when you send us an email, where do you send that email? I've got right there. That's where you would send us an email, info@watereStore.com. And so when you send us an email, then what happens is that we ask you for some information. How many people in your household, that tells us how much water you use, how hard your water is, and things like that. And if you don't have that information, you can either have someone locally test it for you and email us the information. You can have a local lab do the testing for you and email the information, or you can mail us a water sample and we'll test it for you. And I'll have the address where you mail that a little bit later on in this presentation. But I definitely discourage folks from just jumping, as you were saying, Bravo Peters, is just jumping into getting an iron filter automatically before you have your water tested, because we really want to find a solution that's economical for you, it's going to last a long time, require minimal maintenance, and a big return on your investment. And so that's why we really like the information. I know folks get impatient. They think, oh, just give me an answer. Just tell me what I need. But I really need to have the right information to give you the right answer that's going to be best for you folks. But thanks for that question. Oh, you're in Wakefield, Quebec. Yeah, I think you were talking to Heidi today. You had called the store, and I think she was helping you with some links to some information and that. But thanks for tuning in today. I really appreciate that. And I'm from Hillsburg, home of the Bob Skaters. Well, thanks for letting us know, GB. We really appreciate you folks telling. And we've got Carl here from, whoops, sorry, Carl, what happened there? Carl from Newfoundland. Lately, after my system is done recycling, I get a lot of air in my water lines. When I run my taps or flush my toilet, what could cause that? So if it's an iron filter, one that uses air, that sucks in air, then what you can do is you can back off the second cycle, which is the air draw cycle. You can back it off so it doesn't take as much air. If it's coming through your water softener, then you must have a lot of air in your well water. And because the water softener goes through a lot of, water softener goes through a lot of water when it's regenerating, some of that air is getting trapped in the water softener and it's getting released afterwards. So it could be one of those two things. If you've got an older style iron filter that uses a Mazzi injector, sorry, I don't have one with me here right now because it's more about iron filters. We're doing water softeners today, but that can also suck in a lot of air, and then you can back off on the air cycle of that. But if you want to get some more information about Mazzi injectors, you can go to, again, our YouTube channel and search for that. I've got a video on there that I did a few years ago. But thanks for the question, Carl. And we have one here from Coco. We have a cottage well, a softener, but have a smell. What else can we do to eliminate the well smell? So it depends what the smell is. If it's an organic, in other words, if it smells fishy or that kind of thing, then maybe just adding a carbon filter will help. You can get a carbon filter cartridge. A lot of folks, like at my house, for example, we've got a 3-stage ultraviolet system after the water softener. So water goes through a sediment filter, goes through my iron filter first, then the water softener, then it goes through a sediment filter, then a carbon filter, that's a taste and odor filter, and then it goes on to the UV. So that's one way to do it. Another way is, but if the smell is like rotten eggs, that tells you that it's sulfur. And for that, unfortunately, the only thing you can get is an FOC, an iron and sulfur filter. So what's your next steps? You could email us, info@waterestore.com, and we'll send you a form to give us some basic information about what you have, and then from there we can make a recommendation for you on a sulfur filter. But let us know what it smells like. That's an important thing. But thank you for that, Coco. And we've got Ken is back here. Ken's from Nova Scotia. Thanks for letting us know. My iron unit doesn't have a valve that sucks air from outside. Is that normal? You know, there's different kinds of, sorry, Ken, that was, sorry, you don't want that. You wanted that. Iron unit doesn't have a valve that sucks air from outside. Is that normal? Sorry. So it depends what kind. There's different kinds of iron filters out there, and there's some that are horrible. Like I've seen these ones that are sold typically by big box stores, and it just basically says whole house water filtration or something like that, and it kind of looks like a water softener tank. And you read on the box, it says it does iron, it does sediment, it does tannins, it does. It kind of lists about 30 things that it does, and what it actually does is absolutely nothing. It's a bit of a sediment filter and gets rid of some dirt and that kind of thing, but that's really all that it does. So that's kind of the worst kind of iron filter. I hope you don't have one of those. Then we have the ones that were made like 20-25 years ago that use a chemical, potassium permanganate. It's a purple powder that gets dissolved and makes a chemical. Those ones, yeah, they can be, they don't draw in air. Then we get to the ones that, like I say, have a Mazzi, which is on the water line coming in from the well before the pressure tank. There's a valve in there that sucks in air. Or we have the newer ones, the FOB, FOCs, FOKs, that suck in air at the top of the system itself. Now, if yours doesn't suck in air, it could just be a carbon filter. I've seen, again, many years ago, some people were installing carbon filters as iron filters. They didn't work at all. So it really depends on what's happening with yours, what make it is, what model it is. I mean, if you still know where you got it from, or if you have a manufacturer on it, you can maybe follow up with those folks and they can help you with that. And it doesn't have a valve that sucks in. Shifty C. Sometimes on my clack calcite neutralizer, the discharge elbow has a little leak inside the holes where the red C-clip. It's not a constant leak, just happens occasionally. Yeah, and that's a common thing. In fact, I just made a YouTube short video on that exact very topic, and I'm going to show you what the problem is here right now. So, actually, I can probably... get a little bit closer there so you can probably see here. So right up here where Shifty C is talking about is this C clip here. So if we take that off and pull this off, and what he's talking about is at the side of it, can you see that? Is it focus? At the side of it here, it has a little nub sticking out. And what will happen is when the unit goes into backwash, a bit of water will leak out of there. Once the backwash is done, it stops leaking, and then you're good to go. So you might come down in the morning and you see water on the floor and you can't figure out where it came from, and then afterwards you realize that only when it regenerates it has that. So it might happen every 4 or 5 days. So what's the fix? You just get a new drain elbow like this, and if you don't know where to get one, just put it in the comments below. I'll email you a link when I go through the comments tomorrow or on Saturday. But great question, and thanks for that. Shifty C added some more information. Could there potentially be an issue with the valve control head, or would only the culprit be yeah, it's not typically the O-ring. Like you're referring to this O-ring here, you know, but it isn't typically that. It's typically on the side, like I say, you'll have a little nub, and that's why the newer ones don't have that nub anymore, is because they found that. And it seems to be, it's after a period of time. I've seen usually 5 to 7 years, something like that. Sometimes later, not too often earlier, but that happens. But yeah, but thanks for that question. That was great. And great. Okay, what else we got here? Carl. Okay, thanks. I learned a lot about my filter system from our YouTube videos. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Carl. That's why there's, I think we're at 420 YouTube videos right now, and that's why they're out there, is to help educate you folks to become more knowledgeable consumers about this topic. Because when I started doing these videos 10 years ago, I was shocked at how little information folks had. They were buying water softeners, they were buying iron filters, but they had no idea how they worked. And that's why I started the channel, was to help educate people do that. So I'm glad you found value in it. And Shifty C is back again. And when it's not doing its regen, the O-ring looks fine. Does pressure ever build up inside the tank cause that? Yeah. It typically only happens when it goes into backwash. I've seen in scenarios where it goes into backwash, and you'll actually see this shift a little bit. And that could be what you're referring to. So yeah, that's possible. Paul, welcome, Paul. Checking in from northern Wisconsin. Well, welcome. Brine tank fills fine. Regen draws up, drains tank in about 30 minutes, but then brine tank starts slowly filling with water again. High iron content. So usually when it starts filling water during the brine cycle, that tells us there's a problem inside the valve. So one thing I would check there, I'm going to turn Frankenstein this way a little bit. One thing I would check on that is if it's a clack valve, it's simple to do, is you can open it up and check out the pistons and the seal pack and see what kind of shape it's in. Sorry, did you say you had iron? It doesn't say anything about, oh, high iron content. Yes, it is. So I'll bet you what's happening is that the seal pack, that's this thing here, seal pack, okay, is totally coated with iron. And I just did a YouTube short video, geez, I think it was only about a week or so ago that I published. And in there, it talks about fixing the world's dirtiest iron filter. And you should check that out, because that seal pack is just saturated with iron. And so sometimes if it's not too bad, you can take it out and clean it. But most of the time, I just recommend replacing the seal pack and the 2 pistons that are inside there. And again, if it's a clack water softener, it's really simple to do. I've got a link in the video, in the description down below, a link on a video that shows you exactly how to do it. And you can get the replacement stuff from us. We have it on our website. And if you're not sure where that is, you can just go to watereStore.com in the US. You're in Wisconsin, so watereStore.ca in Canada, and like I say, we do offer free shipping and discount pricing, and so you can get it there. And like I say, super easy step-by-step video. You'll be amazed at how easy it is to do. So And that's why you end up with standing water in the tank. I see from your comments here, Paul. So, and we got one here from Nathan. Welcome, Nathan. What's your opinion on products like the water shower stick, a small source softener? Well, I don't give opinions on things I have never seen before, or I've not knowingly seen before, and this is one of those. So it sounds like it's some kind of device that attaches to your shower head that as the water goes through, it softens the water for your shower. That's hard for me to say, as it's coming through. And so the big question on that, of course, would be how long it's going to last. How many gallons is it good for? So it would be compromised by how hard your water is. So if your water is a hardness of 10, for example, versus someone else that has a water hardness of 20, okay, your shower stick will last twice as long as the guy who's got 20. So you need to find out how many gallons it's good for. I've never seen one of these before. I don't know if they work or not. To me, it's kind of a Band-Aid approach. I tend to look at a whole house solution. You can do a bunch of Band-Aid things, but I just find it's better just to bite the bullet, spend the big bucks, do the whole house. And we're going to be getting to here very shortly about how a water softener can save you money in a lot of situations, especially if your family, you've got more than 2 or 3 people in the household. A water softener will save enough money to actually pay for itself, typically within about a year, year and a half. And then, of course, after the next 15 years, 20 years, it's gravy, right? So, like I say, I'm not too big on that. Sorry, it's not a product I'm Shifty C. Mine doesn't have that nub. The water is coming from the bottom up, so I'm assuming the O-ring might not be seating. Just wondering if that could be the culprit for the leak. It could be. And sometimes I've found, yeah, if it doesn't have the nub, then it's definitely that. So what you could do is you could use Plumber's Clear Silicone Grease. If you're not sure where to get it, we have it at our websites, and you can search for it there. You just coat the O-ring with it, put it back in and reseal it, and it might be fine. If it's not, let us know. Send us an email, info@waterestore.com, and we can get you a price on just the O-ring. Sure, it won't be much. So, but yeah, that makes sense. And Paul, okay, that makes sense. I'll check it out. Great, Paul. You do that, and I think you'll find that it'd be a good solution for you. And great round of questions there, guys. I really appreciate that, guys and gals, I guess. I really appreciate that. Keep those questions coming. So, and like I say, we're talking about water softeners today. So even if you want to know how it works, some aspect of how it works, we've been talking a lot about maintenance and troubleshooting and preventative maintenance. We haven't talked anything about installation yet. If you have some questions about that, let me know. But you know, people often ask me, like, where do you start? You know, how do I know if I even need a water softener, things like that? And like I say, the best place to start is with a water test. And let me show you here. So this is where you'd send us a water sample if you want to do that. We don't charge anything for testing water samples. You just mail it to our store, Water Store, 1004 King Street, Midland, Ontario. Yep, we're in Canada, L4R0B8, and that's where when you send us that, we can do the testing for you. Make sure you include your email information, and then we'll check it for you and give you the results and make a recommendation if it's something that we can help you with. And so how do you know if you need a water softener or not? You've never had one before, but something doesn't look right. If you're starting to get staining and scale buildup, the glasses come out of the dishwasher with spots on them, you got glass shower doors and you get those streaks near the bottom, impossible to clean off or super difficult to clean off, that's really what it's all about. It's easier on your family's skin. If you find that you have to use a lot of soap to wash your dishes, that tells you too that you need a water softener. You know, and it lowers energy costs because it doesn't have that scale buildup. There's a few different kinds of water softeners out there. There's traditional ion exchange water softener. That's the kind that we talk about here mostly. There's salt-free water softeners. They don't work. There's the electromagnetic water softeners, or they claim to be water softeners. They don't work. And there's also those non-hydro water softeners out there, the ones that say, ours don't use any hydro. Well, a water softener uses $2 worth of hydro a year. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. But, you know, if you have hard water, how hard's too hard? Well, I've got this... this little pyramid here, that shows that, if you have your water tested and it's showing a hardness of 0 to 0.5 grains per gallon, the water's soft. If it's 1 to 3.5, I have some customers that their water's a hardness of 3 or 4. They want a water softener because they want the house to be spotless. They're picky people like my wife and I, and they want their house to be spotless, and that's where it comes in there. Once you get to a hardness of 3 to 5, it's optional but recommended, and then 7 to 10, the whole world changes, because you can't have a tankless hot water heater if your water's a hardness of 7 or more. You're going to plug that thing solid, and those things are expensive. So yeah, those are the numbers, but it's really, how does your family feel about it? Are they complaining about how difficult it is to keep the house clean? That kind of thing. That's really where you should be looking at it. And, let me, I got a slide here. Let me find it here, right here. So I like this slide. I haven't presented it for a while, but this talks about how you can save money with a water softener. And I think this is really important for a lot of folks to understand. So, soap savings is the big one, right? Typically with a water softener, you use half the amount of soap as you would without a water softener. So if your family's spending $1,000 a year on soap, add it up. Shampoo, bathing soap, dishwasher, washing machine, all that kind of stuff easily add up to $1,000 a year, especially if it's a family of 4. So if you save 40%, that's $400 a year. Energy savings, and I'll show you a little bit more about energy savings and why you'd save energy with a water softener in a minute. But easily $150 a year. Clothes are going to last longer because that scale isn't going to build up on the fibers of the clothing. $150 a year. Appliances lasting longer, $230 a year. I did this chart about 10 years ago. With the cost of appliances and things right now, it definitely would be a lot different. But you can easily save $1,000 a year with a water softener, and that's definitely something to keep in mind. So let me see if we're getting some more questions here. No, but keep those questions coming. I know there's been a couple come in, but I'm going to do a bunch of them at a time in just a few minutes. So just bear with me. But yeah, the soap savings and keeping the house cleaner, there's just so many benefits. I was in a house today, and they had a lot of brand new build, a lot of iron, and they had hard. The water was moderately hard, but they definitely had a lot of iron in it. But the water definitely had a color to it, a rusty color coming out to it. And of course, every new house these days, or every renovation these days, has white toilets, white shower, white sink, white grout, white tile. It's white everywhere. So it really shows up. So. Yeah, I definitely. So this is some of the places where you'll see the hardness build up. So the heating element in your hot water heater, it cakes on. So what happens now is that it has to heat through that scale buildup to be able to heat the water. And that's what makes it so much less efficient. So it might be 85 or 90% energy efficient when that hot water heater was installed, but over the years, as more and more layers of hardness form on that heating element, it becomes less and less efficient. If you have a water softener, this won't happen. And another thing is that, how do you know if you have hard water? Well, you see scale build up everywhere that uses, like a shower head, places like that. And you can see the scale build up on this faucet here. Now, this is a fairly extreme case, of course. But yeah, I mean, faucets like this, I see lots of faucets like this in people's homes. And would drive my wife absolutely bananas. But those are some definite signs of hard water that are taking place there. This is cool. So this is a 2-inch pipe, and this is from an apartment building here in town where we live. And this is a plumber went to the whole apartment building had no hot water. The hot water heater was working perfectly. They couldn't figure it out, so they actually cut the pipe coming out of the hot water heater, and this is what was inside. It was filled with layer after layer after layer of hard water scale because they didn't have a water softener, and it totally clogged that pipe. So the problem was they had to replace a whole bunch of pipes, but all the valves, and these are 2-inch valves. 2-inch valves are, I don't know how much they are, but they must be hundreds of dollars just to buy the replacement 2-inch brass or a copper valve. Hundreds of dollars just for the valve, and then to replace all the valves. It was just horrific. And if they would have had a water softener, they wouldn't have had those problems. But that's an extreme example of what can happen, you know, with hard water. But you don't see it going on. You see it inside. It's inside your dishwasher. It's inside your washing machine. It's inside your hot water heater, etc. So let's see. Some folks have got some questions here, and let me answer them for you. Of course, I lost my space here. Oh, Carl. We're back with Carl. Oop. I have 2 resin tanks, a brine tube, and a UV light, and I have a jet pump. How much PSI would you recommend for a system like mine? So the PSI, you know, I mean, typically you're running something like ideally 30 to 50. If your pump can't handle up to 50, then 30 to 50 or 20 to 40, worst case scenario. The problem with 20 to 40, once you get down around 25 or something like that, it's pretty pathetic. And you'll even get some water softeners that can't draw brine when the pressure gets down so low. So if you can try to maintain it about 30 to 50, that would be ideal to do that. If not, you need to talk to a pump guy, and I'm not a pump guy. So shift DC. Yeah, sometimes when it does the regen and backwash, it does shift the elbow a little bit with the pressure. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I think definitely putting in a the silicone grease for that O-ring will definitely help. Kenny, how about hardness of 1800? Yeah, 1800 is super high. So do I have customers with that? Yeah, we do. So that's 1800 parts per million, which to convert into grains per gallon, you divide it by 17. So that's about 105, 108 grains per gallon of hardness. Yeah, we do have some customers with that. And that's brutal. That's super high. A lot of hardness you're dealing with there. Now, just make sure that that number is the actual hardness parts per million and not the total parts per million, because you may have other stuff in there that's skewing it, like there could be sodium in it and that kind of thing to differentiate it. That's treatable. I mean, you can treat that amount of hardness with a water softener, but now you're getting into a twin tank water softener and of course a big water softener. But yep, it can be done. Brett's here. No matter what I do, the water stays about 3 inches at least above the salt in the tank. If I add salt, it's only a matter of time before the water's above the salt. They told me it's okay. Is it? Well, Brett, actually, it's a good segue into this next slide of mine, and that is, how does a water softener work? And again, I got a link in the description down below how a water softener works. And Brett, I'm going to encourage you to check that out. And what I'm talking about here is, so a lot of folks think that the water in there and the salt in there, the water's always in there. Well, it's not. What happens when it goes through a regeneration cycle, it sucks all of the water out of there. Well, of course, the water touching the salt makes brine, so now it's brine. So it sucks all the brine out of there, all of it, uses it inside the media tank to clean it out, okay? And then it puts new water in there to absorb the salt. Well, the controller controls how much water goes in, and it puts the same amount of water in every single time. So that's not unusual at all, Brett. What's happening to you is that you keep looking in there. It's always the same amount of water, and that's what it should be. Always the same amount of water. So anyway, check out that video. I think you'll find that it'll answer a lot of the questions, and it'll make you feel a lot more comfortable about your water softener. But thanks for that question. I appreciate it. Evan S. I had a 7-gallon per minute well pump and then upgraded to 15 gallons per minute. My iron filter was not backwash. Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right, Evan. Should I replace the Coliform media with, or will the new 15 gallons per minute clean it up? You know, that's a really good question. Hopefully and probably it will clean it up. It depends on how far gone it was. Now, one negative about Coliform media is that it doesn't last as long as berm media or some of the other medias or catalytic carbon in certain situations with low iron content. Coliform doesn't last all that long, so it depends on how old it is and that kind of thing. It's not unusual for Coliform to only last 7 to 10 years. So, and of course, it depends on your water usage and how much iron you have and all that other kind of stuff. So I'm glad you upgraded the pump, because that 7 gallons per minute would never backwash a 2.5 gallon per minute, a 2.5 cubic foot Coliform filter. And I have a feeling you and I have talked about this topic before. But anyway, I'm glad you upgraded that pump, and that will make a big difference. And by the way, folks, I know we're not talking about iron filters here, but I'm just going to make a small segue, and that is, or a small deviation from the topic at hand, and that's why when we're talking about iron filters with folks, we always ask them for the flow rate from their well pump, and I've got a great YouTube video that shows you how to calculate it yourself, and of course, it's in the link description down below. But thanks for that, Evan. Oh, sorry, we talked about that one already. Sorry. Oh, Kenny. What happened there? Kenny? Send. That's odd. I keep getting the same one. Let's try this one here. My well pump pressure is set to 60. Okay, good. So, you're in good shape there. At 60, that's, I'd like to have that. Kenny, how about a hardness of 670? Treatable? Yeah, absolutely, all day long. We do it every day of the week. So again, 670 parts per million divided by 17 is, what's that, about 44, 7, 28? Yeah, just about exactly 40 grains per gallon of hardness. No problem. We treat that all the time, although I would recommend a dual tank instead of a single tank water softener for that. And but yeah, that's no problem at all. And Rich, welcome Rich. We sit atop limestone in my region. Water softener is a must. Yeah, absolutely. And I can see that. And there's all kinds of different areas. Even the area that I serve, like me myself going out and serving, we travel within about an hour from where our store is here. And I tested somebody today. I think their hardness was only 3 or 4. I've tested some people that are 40, like Kenny was asking us about just a few minutes ago. I've got people that are over 100. So it's all over the place. And one thing you have to be careful of is that if you move into a new area and your neighbor has drilled a well or had their water tested, and they've got, some guy came out, tested my water, I've got a hardness of 15. That doesn't mean you'll have a hardness of 15, even though you're right next door. One of the classic stories, the first year I was in business, I went out to see some folks, and they had the worst water ever. I mean, the worst water ever. Super hard, lots of iron, tannins. It stunk from sulfur. It was horrible. About a week later, I got a call from their neighbor, and I thought, oh no. I went out to see their neighbor, and their neighbor, the water was soft, no iron, didn't smell. It was, and these people were right side by side. Their wells are maybe 50 to 75 feet apart. And so you never know. You always have to have the water tested. And but thanks for that, Rich. Yeah, you're definitely. Brett, we have an RO system under kitchen sink that is from softened water. Should we run a separate water line for the RO that isn't softened before we close our basement ceiling and next month from the renos? Well, you're right. That's the right time to do it when you're doing that. But definitely you want to run softened water into your RO, because what's going to happen is it's going to scale up the membrane. We just had a situation with that last week. We checked out someone where through a series of circumstances ended up being unsoftened water going into that RO, and it was not very old. It was only 4 or 5 months old, and the membrane had already started to clog. They were getting hardly any production. And so we had to reroute it so that there'd be softened water going in. Always, always, always. In fact, ROs, I think they recommend a hardness of 5 or 7 or something like that. But I recommend 0. We put big commercial ROs in for car washes, and they had a hardness of 2 or 3 or 4 or something like that. And we found that the maintenance on those big ROs was significantly higher than when they had water softener in there. So definitely softened water going into that RO. But thanks for that question. That was a good one. The only lines in our house that aren't softened are the outside taps. And and that's what is the case quite often, is that folks do it that way, and that's the right way. But it depends on your circumstance. So I'll give you an example. So I'm a car guy, so I like washing my cars. That's a big deal for me. So I've got softened water going into my outside tap. that I use in the garage, for example. The rest of the outside taps that I use for watering the lawn and that kind of thing, yep, they're untreated, that kind of thing. But sometimes they can't be separated. What I mean by that is Brett was just asking about closing in the ceiling and that. So what happens sometimes when homes are built or plumbed, the water starts off in one central location, it goes through the water softener, and then it goes to the kitchen, and then it goes to the laundry room, and then it goes outside. Well, in a scenario like that, we can't separate it out. If your ceiling is unfinished, like at Brett's place, you can separate those water lines and have the untreated water coming back, or when the house is being built, as long as they separate those outside taps, they can easily do that. And that's the right time to do it. But thanks for that question. And Bravo Peters, yeah, I'm sorry, that's my jargon, right? RO is reverse osmosis for those who don't know. Yeah, my apologies for that. I get into the jargon. I try not to, but yeah, it's a bad habit. Anyway, so we spoke a little bit earlier about, keep those questions coming, by the way. I'll answer them all, and we'll get through this, but please keep them coming. This is for you. This is what the session is for you. It's all about your questions, not my questions. And so we were talking a little bit about buying water softeners, and we did a buyer's guide video just a few weeks ago. We did a live stream with Anna, and we turned that into videos that you could check out. So if you are looking for a buyer's guide for water softeners, we've got it. Just check Gary the Water Guy YouTube channel. It's there. And just really quickly, what are folks looking for or should they be looking for when you're thinking about a water softener? Definitely made in North America. There's lots of really great made in North America water softeners. Definitely non-proprietary. So in other words, so you can get parts and they don't hold your ransom because you have to go back to them for parts. So that's why I like the Clack WS1 valve. You can buy the parts online. You can get manuals online. I've got lots of YouTube videos that'll help you do your own maintenance. Avoid the big box store water softeners. Why? Because almost all of them are made in China or Korea. They'll last you, if you're lucky, 3 to 4 years. I had someone in here the other day, his water softener that he bought from a very big box store company. That water softener only lasted about 2 years. So yeah, but yeah, and like I say, if you're looking for more information about water softeners and that kind of thing, I definitely encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about maintenance. I think a lot of you folks are interested in maintenance and that kind of thing. And water softener sizing, that's something we help folks with too. So again, if you're thinking about investing in a water softener, I've got a great YouTube video that goes into sizing. I don't think that's a really big topic for today with you folks. I'm just moving ahead. So, if you are thinking about installing your own water softener, or you just want to learn more about water softener installation, I did a great live stream a little while ago with water softener installation tips and tricks. And again, of course, I got a link in the description down below that you can check that one out. And yeah, and like I say, keep those questions coming. I'm going to check the poll. How's the poll doing here? So we've had 17 votes. Thank you very much for contributing to the poll. And yeah, fully 71% are looking for maintenance and troubleshooting information. And so yeah, I'm trying to cover that off as best as I can and how they work. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. So great. Thank you for participating in the poll. And so this is something that a lot of you folks may think about. And this is a sequence of water filtration. So I mentioned earlier in my home, I'm on a well. We don't have very good water. So we've got sulfur, we've got iron, we got hard water. And that. So this sequence of event is very important when you're on well water, and it's important what order the equipment is in. So you can see here, it all starts off at the well, and then the pressure tank, and then from there it goes through the spin down filter. Someone was asking me about spin down filters a little bit earlier, and then it goes through a sediment. Now you don't need all this stuff, okay? So and that's why we need to test your water to find out what's in your water, to find out what we need to recommend for your situation. But So basically what we do is we clean up the water first. We get rid of the dirt. We get rid of the iron. It goes through the water softener. And then from there, if you have tannins, it goes through a tannin filter. Then the UV system, that's L on this chart. And then it goes on to the reverse osmosis and to your whole house. So yeah, so if you're thinking about what order the equipment should go in and that kind of thing. So talking about installation now for a little bit. So one thing folks often ask me about is air gaps. How can you have an air gap? So we have this air gap module available that you can run the drain line and hook it up to there, and that gives an air gap between the drain and the drain line and your drain location. And they're a neat little thing. Actually, I got one here somewhere, right here. This guy right here. And so you hook up the drain line to here, and then this creates the air gap in the bottom, goes into the standpipe, into drain stack. Okay, and so those are pretty cool. And we were talking earlier about water softener settings. Someone was asking about how much salt they're using and that kind of thing. And I was saying that that's probably a settings thing. And again, I've got a great YouTube video that goes into that, and I'll put that down below. Someone once mentioned during these live streams, he said, oh, the guy just sends you other videos. Well, I can't go over every single topic in an hour. And to be honest, we're getting close to that hour right now. So I try to share as much information and help as many of you folks that are participating today in this Q&A, but also anyone else that's viewing this live stream after it's done. This is evergreen material. This will be on our YouTube channel forever, so you can check back to it at any time. So yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier about maintenance, about making your water softener last and things like that. And so some things that you may or may not consider as part of your maintenance, but are very important. And again, there's lots of information about that in my YouTube videos. So how much salt should or shouldn't be in your water softener? And again, that depends on how much water you're using, because the more water you use, the more often you turn over that salt. And it needs to be turned over. It needs to be used up. So one person with relatively soft water, little old lady, that kind of thing, she isn't going to use much water, so it's not going to use much salt. So don't fill that brine tank full of salt. Just keep it fairly low. A family of 4, 5, 3 teenagers, that kind of thing, you're going to be using lots of water. You just keep cramming it full, especially if the water's hard, right? And so you're going to be going through it that much. And like I say, running out of salt once a year is great preventative maintenance for your water softener. If you're using your water softener will also get rid of iron. You've got up to 1 part per million of iron. Then using something like Rust Out, a product like that to clean the media in your water softener is a necessity, and will definitely make it last longer. So definitely something to keep in mind. And surge suppressor we talked about, right? And bypass. So exercising the bypass. I didn't talk about this earlier. I know you're thinking, what in the world are you talking about, Gary? So this is a bypass, right? This is what connects the water softener to the plumbing. And so what that means is when you're doing maintenance on the water softener, or if the water softener is spraying a leak or something like that, you could always bypass the water softener by turning these 2 valves so the points face each other. And that'll take the water softener offline so you can do work on the water softener. But if you don't exercise, in other words, turn these bypass valves very often, they'll become stiff. And when you do turn them, you may actually run into a leak. So that's why I recommend, if you can do that once a year, it'll definitely pay dividends in the long run. I've run into a situation with that where, not with our Clack water softeners, they're pretty good, but it was a different brand of water softener. It had never been bypassed. It was probably 15 or 20 years old. I had to do some work on the water softener. I bypassed it. Once I put it back into service, this thing leaked. And this bypass leaked. And there was no way of getting parts for it. And it was a nightmare. So, so I definitely recommend exercising those bypass valves. Definitely pay dividends for you in the long run. How are we doing with our questions here, folks? Looking for those questions. And oh, I got some good questions here. Got a question here from Arbella. Welcome, Arbella. Hi, I'm new to this channel. Well, great. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you stopping by. What are water softeners? Yeah, and that's a really great question. Most of the folks on here have water softeners, are familiar with water softeners, but you don't, and that's no problem. And I've got a great YouTube video that I put a link in the description down below, and actually it's called Water Softener for Beginners, and it actually talks about what a water softener is, what a water softener does, and it has a link there that'll actually go through another video that tells you how a water softener works. So I definitely encourage you to check that out once this live stream is done, and you'll see. And with some of the information that's already been presented this evening in this live stream, you'll get some more information to see if water softener makes sense for your family. And if you need some more information, you can always email us. Contact us right here. info@waterestore.com is how you email us, how you reach us, and that's the best way to get some information from us. All right, so great, thank you for that question. Another question from Rose. So my water has a slip to it. I'm thinking it may be too soft. Oh, yeah. So I know what you're saying. Yep, the water. And some people my brother used to call that the water feels slimy. And it may be too soft, but water can only be softened down to 0. But the problem is, if the water softener isn't set correctly, I'll give you an example. If your water's a hardness of 10 and the water softener is set at the default settings that it comes with from the factory, a hardness of 20, what that means is it'll soften your water down to 0, but it'll use more salt and make more brine, and the water will have more sodium residual after it softened your water, and that can cause it to feeling like that, to have that slipperiness. So definitely a matter of having your water tested and checking out to make sure if your water softener is set correctly for your water's hardness, iron content, and things like that. So that could be what's going on. Arbella, what are water softeners? I'm curious, please. No hate. There's no hate at all. And like I say, we've got lots of information, and I definitely encourage you to check it out in the description down below, those videos I mentioned earlier. And Rich, my parts per million is about 275 using a digital meter. It comes from our village water system that serves approximately 650 homes. What is the hardness? Yeah, 275 parts per million, or any parts per million divided by 17 gives you your hardness in grains per gallon. So I can't do 275 divided by 17 in my head, but I think it's going to be somewhere around 15, right? So 15 grains per gallon of hardness, you definitely should have a water softener with that. Otherwise, you definitely will be dealing with a lot of grief in your household, difficult to keep clean, damaging shower doors. If you've got glass shower doors, you'll have those streaks that'll be horrible to clean off. You're going to have problems with your toilets. You can have, in our town here, we have a hardness in this specific area where there's a lot of restaurants, hardness of 14. And 20 years ago, actually before we opened 20 years ago, because it was my first sale, we sold a friend of mine owned a restaurant. It's a chain franchise, and within the first year and a half, they had to replace every toilet. They had to replace the hot water heaters. They had to replace the ice machines. It was a disaster. It was just all from hard water. So like I say, he was my first commercial customer. We put in a big water softener for them, and for their maintenance just disappeared on all those things. All of a sudden, their toilets lasted, their ice machine lasted, everything lasted, their coffee machine, everything, because they had soft water. So it makes a huge difference, especially at that level of hardness. Yep, JB was pointing out that this is a water softener here, so you have an idea what it looks like. I mean, there's different kinds, different models, different shapes, different sizes, but yep, that's a good one. And Brett we have a what happened there? We have a Clack looking water softener. There's quite a few old, maybe 10 years at least. I'm currently draining the salt completely, like in your video. After cleaning, I'll refill it and do add salt again. So you're talking about 10-year-old Clack water softener. So my previous home, when we started this business 20 years ago, we put in a water softener. Now the guy that bought that house from us a few years ago still lives in that home. I was in there replacing his RO recently, and that water softener, Clack Belt water softener, is over 20 years old, still going strong, and that's why I say they last a long time. But yeah, Thank you for that. Okay, yes. Kenny. After initial install, please provide an overview of startup sequence. Yeah, so Kenny, I have some really good videos on that. But basically, the startup sequence is this. You've installed it up. You've connected it up to the plumbing. So what you need to do now is you need to put the unit into bypass. You need to run some water somewhere in wherever is downstream to flush out any debris that might have incurred while you connected it up. Then what you need to do is you need to put it into backwash, and you do that by holding down the regen button for 5 seconds. It goes into backwash. Once it's in backwash and it starts counting down, then you open up the inlet valve halfway, and what that's doing now is letting water to come in, and the air is being pushed out and it's going out through the drain line. Once you hear that water's actually running to the drain, then what you can do is you can open it up a little bit more than halfway. And so now what you're doing is you're cleaning all the fines out of the tank and flushing it all to the drain. So once it's pretty much finished this backwash cycle, which is 8 minutes typically, then you can open it up all the way and start it onto its next cycle. Now you take a 5-gallon bucket of water and you'd pour it in with the brine, with the salt, with the brine. And so at the second cycle is the brine cycle. So now you should see that water. It's not brine yet because you haven't added the salt. You should see that water slowly dropping as it's sucking the water out of there. So that tells you it's sucking water properly. That's good. You press regen again to go to the next cycle. So now it's in the backwash cycle. And you let it run there for a few minutes. Now both the inlet valve should be totally open at this point. And you let it run in backwash for a little bit, advance it, let it run in rinse, then it's going to go to the fill cycle, so it's going to automatically raise that water level inside. And then you add the salt, and then you open up the outlet side of it, run some water at like a bathtub or a laundry sink or something like that to get rid of all the fines, and then you're good to go. I usually set it for regen at that point, so it automatically regenerates that night. Click this once, and it'll regenerate at night. Actually, I think it's showing regen today up here. Can you see that? Yeah, you see it flashing up here, regen today. Okay. And and then that's it. And then you just let some water run. Now, if you just installed the water softener and you go to drink the water softener, it's going to taste salty because it's just gone through this whole process. Let it go through a regeneration cycle, either its own or force a regeneration by starting at the regeneration cycle, holding it down for 5 seconds, starting the cycle, letting it go through the whole process itself, and then go from there. And then things will return to normal, and it'll just carry on by itself from there. I hope that answers your question, Kenny. I think everyone else probably found that useful too. Yeah, Kenny, I don't know what happens. Sorry, Kenny, it seems so many times I pick on you and it gives me somebody else's. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Anyway. All right, great. Sorry, Kenny just made a comment saying that he knows that we have a detailed YouTube video on this. And we do. And like I say, I don't mind going over it this evening with you. And Evan, what is the main cause for coliform in well water? When we first moved into our new house, we had coliform, but then shocked the well to make it safe. Yeah, so coliform bacteria can come from a number of different places. One of the most common is earwigs. Yep, earwigs get into the well. They die, there's no food source for them, they fall into the water, and often coliform is a bacteria from cold-blooded animals, that kind of thing, and you can have it. Now, you can shock a well and get rid of it short term, but if the water is being replenished in your well already has coliform bacteria in it, it's just going to keep coming back. And that's where you end up having to go to an ultraviolet disinfection system, or like I like to say, 2 kinds of people buy a UV system. That is people that have bacteria in their water and get rid of it, or people that never want to have bacteria in their water and do it as a preventative. But that's how it happens. It can come from earwigs or bugs. Thanks for that question. Rich. I discovered the best trick to soft water in Minnesota. Moved to South Dakota. Good one, Rich. And yeah, you know, I mean, this kind of thing happens. I mean, I'm in the water filtration business, and we help fix families' water. And But, you know, I mean, sometimes folks have really, really, really bad water. And, you know, a contractor that does work, that we do work with, said to me one day, so Gary, you can fix everybody's water, right? You can fix everybody's water. I said 99% of the time. We have had a couple situations where we've recommended to folks just drill a new well. Their water was just so bad, it was going to cost huge amounts of money. It was going to be a pain for them because there'd be pumps running in their house all the time. And they didn't have the storage capacity for a whole house reverse osmosis system. And the maintenance was going to be high. There was just so many negatives. I had to recommend to them. And I know it was at great expense to them, but in the long run, it was the best decision that they made, and I'm glad they did it. So sometimes it just doesn't make sense to throw a whole bunch of money at fixing it something. But yeah, moving is a is a good one. So yeah, bravo, Peter. Definitely gives you a thumb up on that one. Hi, Al. From what you're saying, it sounds like it's okay to have the water level. Oops, sorry. Sometimes this comment thing flashes back. To have the water level in the brine tank considerably higher than the salt. Do I understand that correctly? No. Sorry, Al, you misunderstood. The water softener puts the right amount of water in there, and it's counting on all of the water that it's putting in there touching the salt. All of it touching the salt. So the only way it can do that is by the salt level being higher than the water. Okay? So because if there's water above the salt, that water that's above the salt isn't touching the salt, so it's not absorbing the right amount of salt to make the right concentration of sodium in that brine to properly backwash the water softener. So it should always be, the salt should be higher than the water. Hope that answered your question now. Sarah, welcome Sarah. What can be done for sulfur odor? Yeah, so we have sulfur filters, an iron sulfur filter, FOB, FOC, FOK. If you add a comment down below and ask me that same question, I'll email you a link to a YouTube video that I have that talks about those iron and sulfur filters. And why I say iron and sulfur filters, they get rid of sulfur, but they also get rid of iron because it's the same process. We oxidize the iron and sulfur out of it, so it does both. So if you have iron in your water, get rid of it. If you don't have any iron in your water, it's still an iron and sulfur filter, but it would just do the sulfur part of your water. So yeah, but it can definitely be fixed. We do that every single day here. I had a customer today that again had sulfur in their water, so that's very fine. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm not far from Midland. You just got a new customer. Well, thanks, Brett. That's good to hear. I hope everyone that's tuning in to hear, if they have any concerns about their water or any needs, I'd be happy to make a recommendation for anybody, whether you're right around the corner from me or you're in South Dakota, Minnesota, or Ireland, or Newfoundland. Wherever you are, we're happy to help you. And we help folks all over. We have customers from Alaska to Florida and everywhere in between. Hi, I have a Premier AF40K that drains every day at 2 p.m. and the drainage lasts an hour. That makes me lose a lot of water. Please tell me if I could do something to reduce this time. Probably not. If it's a water softener, most standard efficiency water softeners take an hour and a half to go through their whole regeneration cycle. So the first part is a backwash, usually takes about 8 minutes. The second cycle is a brine cycle, which usually takes about 60 minutes. Then there's another backwash, usually 4 minutes. Then there's a rinse cycle, usually 4 minutes. And then there's a fill cycle where there's no water running to the drain. So yeah, it takes about an hour and a half. Now there are high efficiency water softeners. We have the Aquamaster line of water softeners that we have here, only take 22 minutes, only use 13 or 14 gallons of water. But those are specifically made for that purpose. So you can't just change the settings in your standard efficiency water softener and end up with a high efficiency water softener. It doesn't work that way. But if you put in the comments down below that you're interested in some more information about the high efficiency water softeners, I definitely encourage you to check that out. And but thanks for that question. Jay Watkins Sr., welcome. What does it mean when the salt doesn't dissolve? Yeah, so what happens is water goes in to the brine tank, okay? Water will only absorb so much salt, and that's what makes it into brine. So the rest of the salt doesn't dissolve. So as long as that brine is sitting there, that salt, the rest of the salt that's in the brine tank, is not going to dissolve any further, okay? Until that goes through a regeneration cycle, it sucks the brine out of there and puts new water in that isn't saturated with salt, and it starts absorbing the salt and makes brine for the next cycle. And that's how a water softener consumes that salt, by the water absorbing it. Thanks for the question. Mike Hedrick, I like how you pronounce process. That's just how I talk. Folks from California say I have an accent. I'm sure I do. I'm a long-time subscriber. Well, welcome, Chris. Good to see you. I live in Florida and have well water with high hardness and sulfur. My local pro had me change our FOC filter after our softener. Can you comment on this method? Had me change our FOC filter and move it after your water softener. So the only time that I would consider doing something like that, it would be incredibly rare, is, yeah, but you're shooting yourself in the foot doing it that way. See, an FOC can only handle up to 1 part per million of iron. Well, a water softener should only be handling up to 1 part per million of iron. If your guy, the water filtration specialist that you're using, if he believes that your water softener can handle 3 or 4 parts per million of iron, and that's what you have, and we know that your FOC can't handle that much iron, then it's worth a try. It's a Band-Aid approach. It's definitely going to shorten the life of your water softener if your iron content is that high. It would make for an interesting conversation with you and the guy that made that recommendation. Just ask him why. Like what criteria did he use to make that decision? If you don't mind commenting or sending me an email, info@watereStore.com is our email address. I'd be interested in hearing his. I'm not criticizing him. I'm just listening, you know, and that's how you learn, right? You hear from all different kinds of people. I mean, I've attended so many conventions on water filtration. I've listened to so many seminars. You wouldn't believe how many clack rebuild seminars I've gone through. I'd say at least 6 or 7, because every time I go through, I review the same stuff, but there's different nuances, and the presenter has different ways of different aspects, and I ask questions and learn more about different nuances, and that's how you learn, right? So I'm actually anxious to learn what his philosophy is on that. Al, thanks for clarifying my salt and water level question, Gary. So I guess the exception would be when you annually letting, yes, exactly. You're right. That's the exception, Al, is when you're annually letting it just run out of salt. That is the time when the water level's definitely going to be higher than the salt. And while you're doing that, a tip is stir that salt up. Because what happens then is the water that's not touching the salt, the water that's above the salt that isn't absorbing the salt, if you stir it up, some of that new non-brined water will mix with the brined water and with the salt, and it will help to not only use up that salt more quickly, so you can start filling it with fresh salt, but also make sure you've got a fairly strong brine charge while you're going through that process. But good question, Al. Thank you. Grandview Lawn Care. Welcome. Gary, is it normal for my 2-stage whole house water filter to be not very dirty? The first stage is a 5 micron sediment. The second stage, 5 micron carbon block. Yeah, typically that's when we go with a 2-stage filter. I mean, again, we have to think about what the purpose of this is. Is it well water? Is it city water? You're trying to get rid of the chlorine in the city water. You're trying to pre-filter before an ultraviolet light, or you're just trying to get rid of the dirt and any potential chemicals that are in the water. So a sediment filter is for dirt, carbon filters for chemicals, and but that's the right procedure. It goes through sediment first, then the carbon, then goes on from there. It really doesn't matter what the micron is of the carbon. The sediment does matter, though, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Thanks for the question. Evan. Thanks. I will check out your UV. Oh, sorry. There you are. I would check out your UV systems to be safe. Also, I changed my iron filter settings and removed the rinse cycle for the K-Lux media like you recommend. It works much better. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I don't... You know, I see all kinds of strange things going on with programming and things like that. And again, I've seen that happen with these systems. Sorry, not this. With the air over media, K-Lux, berm systems and that kind of thing. They'll have a backwash cycle, which makes 100% sense. They'll have an air draw cycle, makes 100% sense. And then they'll have a rinse cycle after that releases all the air. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think, Evan, that's what you were struggling with. So I'm glad you got that sorted out. And... how often do you fill the salt the tank with salt? Approximate average. It depends on how much water you use, and it depends on how hard your water is, how big the water softener is, that kind of thing. So at my house, I can speak to my house. Two of us in my house, we've got a Clack type water softener. Our water is a hardness of about 12 or something like that. And we probably go through about 4 to 5 40-pound bags a year. With that. So, I mean, for most of my customers, I'd say that's probably about average. For folks with higher iron and larger families, you know, they might go through 10, 12, 15 bags of salt a year, 40-pound bags. How much is a bag of salt? Anywhere from $5 to $8, depending on where you live and if you're in the US or Canada, the money difference, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's a pretty good idea. And Jiggy, welcome Jiggy. How are some of the online companies like Springwell or QWT, SoftPro Elites, along with their whole house filters? Don't know. So I tend not to comment too much on products I'm not familiar with. And to be honest, I'm not familiar with any of those. There's a lot of products being sold online, a lot of products on Amazon, a lot of Chinese products. And hey, I'm really big on made in North America products because I've had really bad experience with made in China products. And you got to realize, I'm installing or recommending equipment that are in people's homes. And if something springs a leak or if something bursts, it's a big problem. Okay? And and I've had situations in the past. I've tried the Chinese and the Korean products, and I've had them burst. I've had them crack. I've had them be horrific to maintain. I've been unable to get parts for them. I've had all kinds of negative situations, and I tried it for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months altogether, and then finally I just said enough is enough. And we've been working with Made in North America water softeners, iron filters, tannin filters, UV systems, reverse osmosis systems, all made in North America, and we've had so much less grief, and our customers have been so much happier. And so a lot of the stuff I see on Amazon is the Chinese and the Korean stuff, and I'm scared to death. I won't install it for you. If you buy it and you ask me to install it, I won't do it because it's just far too risky, and I definitely recommend you stay away. Just my thoughts. But those specific products I don't know anything about, so I can't really speak to those. But thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Chris, thanks Gary. I'll ask my local water pro next time they are out and email you. I did have my water tested by a local lab and the iron was very low, so not much. Hardness is 20 grains per gallon. 3 parts per million hydrogen sulfide. Yeah, so that's high. So why would he do it that way? The only other reason might be that so the water going through the sulfur filter, all the backwash water, all the water that the water softener uses to clean itself, which could be 40, 50, 60 gallons at a time, is also going through the hydrogen sulfur filter. So maybe he thought there'd be less water usage by putting the hydrogen sulfur filter after the water softener. That's another maybe, but I'd be interested to hear. Thank you for that. And Jiggy, thank you for the response. Makes sense. They actually say that it's made in America. Oh, well, that's great. Also offer lifetime warranty along with NSF certified on components. That's good news too. And so, like I say, as long as you have confidence in the product, and maybe you can check the reviews on those products, but yeah, that's but I'm glad to see you're doing your homework, and that's great. That'll pay big dividends for you. Thank you for that. Keep those questions coming, folks. And so we talked a little bit about maintenance, preventative maintenance. Now we're talking a little bit about repair and things like that. So one big area of repair we touched on it earlier, and that's about water softener being clogged with salt, and that's an important repair. And I've actually got a couple of videos on this. In fact, I think the second video I ever made was on this topic, and it's gotten almost 1 million views. So I know it's helped a lot of folks. So I definitely encourage you to check that out if you're struggling with a salt clog in your water softener. It is fairly common, to be honest. Correct water softener, salt. Yeah, we talked about water softener levels, salt levels. And again, I got a video that talks all about that down below. We talked about the bypass and about talked about media cleaning. And so when you're troubleshooting a water softener, let's just talk about that for a couple of minutes here. We need to know what is it doing, what is it not doing. Check some of the basics first. You know, is it plugged in? If the screen is empty, I went to see a customer today, and they had nothing on the screen. And so it was just their surge suppressor needed to be reset. That's all it was. So you plug it into an outlet that you know works, or unplug it and plug something into a blow dryer is usually what I plug into to make sure that outlet works if the screen is blank. Watch for the dreaded three-way bypass. What's a dreaded three-way bypass? I run into this about once every couple months. Someone has something like this installed around their water softener. It was an old installation that was done a long time ago. And so it looks something like this. So water goes into their water softener here, comes out of their water softener here, and goes on. And someone put in this three-way bypass. Probably at one time the water softener didn't have a bypass, and the idea is that this valve is open, this valve is open, and this valve is closed. So water goes this way. But what invariably happens is someone does some service at this place, and they'll close this valve because they want to shut off all the water. They'll close this valve, and then they'll do some service on. Could be the hot water tank, could be whatever. And then when they finish the service, they come back and they open up all the valves. And they open up this one, and they open up this one, and guess which other one they open? They open up this one. And now, a few weeks or a month or 2 months later, I get a message saying, my water softener isn't working anymore. What's going on? And I go out there, and sure enough, I find this valve is open. And you'd be amazed how many times we go out there, people have a 10 or 15-year-old water softener, and they say, I think it's time for a new water softener. It's not working. I go out there, that three-way bypass is open. I close it, ask them to stop by the store and to bring in a water sample. We test it. Sure enough, it's working. They don't need a water softener at all. So that's the dreaded three-way bypass. Be careful of that. Check for the meter. Most water softeners are metered. Clack water softener, if you run water in the house, the word softening should be flashing on there. If it's not, there's a problem with the meter. The meter needs to be replaced. So check that out. But again, there's a lot of good troubleshooting information, and I go through it step by step. And I have a great YouTube video that goes through that with you step by step. And the thumbnail looks a whole lot like that. And again, GaryTheWaterGuy.com is where you find my YouTube videos. And so we're starting to run short on time. If you've got a question you've been holding back, now's the time. And in terms of repairing the water softener, again, it's pretty straightforward. Just figure out what symptoms you're getting. Is it leaking? That seems to be a repair. Is there nothing on the screen here? That seems to be a not common repair, but a repair that we get from time to time. Or is it just not working? If it's going through its cycles properly, it's using salt, it's doing all those other things. It's doing everything it should, but just not giving you soft water. Well, that tells us usually that the media beads inside here are worn out, and you need to replace those media beads, or it's time for a new water softener. And so that's something to check out. Whenever you do any work on a water softener, we were talking about O-rings a little bit earlier. I always suggest using Plumber's Clear silicone grease. It lubricates it, keeps it from stretching, but it also helps that rubber last longer. And definitely a good preventative maintenance tip. If you don't know where to find the grease, put a link in or put a comment down below, and I'll add a link later on. And So we do a lot of work with Clack water softeners. We also have a fair amount of experience with Aquamaster and Water Boss water softeners. This is what they look like. It's a tank within a tank. And so one common area of that they've been struggling with those is that sometimes the piston gets stuck inside, and what'll happen is either the tank will fill up with water, or you'll have water that keeps running to drain or something like that. And you know, we've helped out a lot of folks with these, the drive-in cap assemblies. I've got a great YouTube video that shows you how to a great YouTube video that shows you how to replace this part, and it'll fix that that setup for you. So it's definitely something that you may want to check out if you're having problems with your Aquamaster or any Hague products. They typically all use the same valve. And that. So let's see if we got some more questions here. And Carl, thanks, Gary. I don't have anyone in my area, excuse me, that services my system. So this Q&A and your videos really help. And you're right, Carl. That's, again, one of the reasons why I started this YouTube channel and why we have customers, like I say, coast to coast, Canada and US, is because so often you're in areas that are remote where there isn't anyone, or that it would cost a fortune to bring someone in, or it might be a cabin or a cottage where you're only there on the weekend. Well, trying to get somebody out on the weekend is super tough, so you have to take some time off work. Let's say get off work early on Friday or something like that to meet someone there, and then for some reason they don't show, and that kind of thing. So the more information I give you, a lot of the folks that watch my this channel and participate in my live streams are do-it-yourselfers. You don't have to be, but they are, and so this helps you out a lot. And so I'm glad that helped you. And sorry, where was I here? Here. Amarnath, welcome. My water softener regenerates every night. Is it because water coming out of the sprinklers, which I believe is pre-filter, smells really sulfur? Yeah, so this you have to be careful of, okay? Generally speaking, you don't want to have your irrigation system run through your water softener or your iron and sulfur filter, because it'll never keep up. I had a situation of this. Got a customer, has a very large property and a large irrigation system and a big home with a lot of bathrooms and a lot of amenities, swimming pool and all that other kind of stuff. He has sulfur in his water. And so we installed a very big iron and sulfur filter, but he kept having problems with sulfur. So we had a few callbacks. I went back and checked a number of times. And then I noticed that the irrigation system was hooked up after the iron and sulfur filter. So we spoke about that, and that had been done by someone else after we had done the initial installation. And he said, well, he didn't like the smell of the water coming out of the irrigation system. Well, the problem was the irrigation system was blowing through the full capacity of the iron and sulfur filter, and in a couple hours, its capacity was gone by 7 o'clock in the morning. So when the family got up and was taking their showers and that, it was gone. So we're talking about water filtration here for homes, not for irrigation systems and things like that. Yeah, I do have some customers that have water softeners for their irrigation systems because they don't want water spots on their windows. Yeah, we do have a few situations like that. But generally speaking, what we're talking about here is in-home systems. And if we are installing the whole house filter along with softener, does it go before or after the softener? Yeah, so it depends what you want to accomplish here. If your goal, if you're on well water and you've got a lot of dirt in your water, then you install it before the water softener. So I'd say maybe 5% of my customers are installed that way. If you want to do fine filtering and you also want to get rid of chemicals from your water, that would typically go after the water softener. So it really depends what you want to accomplish. If you're on well water, city water, that kind of thing. And just saw your email, so an apology for joining late. Oh, no problem. So is this session limited to water softeners? If so, is there another session centralized on water filtration? Yeah, I typically do a live stream once a month. This one is Q&A on water softeners, and we're actually quite a bit over time right now. But Still got time for your questions. But yeah, there'll be another one on whole house filtration. I typically do another one on reverse osmosis drinking water systems. Like I say, I usually do these the last Thursday of the month. So yeah, definitely. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, in the community tab, usually a week or so ahead of time, I announce that I have a live stream coming up. And then I also post some stuff on the community tab on there. And so GaryTheWaterGuy.com is my YouTube channel. So definitely encourage you to do that. And is it normal for chunks of dirt to fall off my water filter when I change it? I change it every 4 months. So you got a lot of dirt going on there, and that's a lot of work changing your filter every 4 months. There is such a thing as an automatic backwashing filter, and maybe that's what Steve was talking about here earlier, just a few minutes ago. And yeah, that's something not really part of today's topic, but you can get something that looks like a water softener, but just gets rid of the dirt. And that's what I would definitely recommend to you. It's a whole house automatic backwashing filter. If you put a comment down below, just asking for more information, I can give you a link to that and you can check that out. And from Mike, Gary, thank you for all your videos. I've watched many of them. You're welcome. This is what I do, and the great thing is, if you find a video that's helpful, like a lot of folks use them for UV maintenance and things like that, you can refer to it once a year and check it out. Bravo Peters, many thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time. You're welcome. Thank you for watching. I'm really pleased. And Arbella, I see you've asked some more questions about water softeners. Again, check the link down below. You'll find the information that you need there. And that's great. Okay, let's just see if I got a few little things here to help you with, yeah, and we were talking a little bit earlier about rebuilding the water softener, tearing it down, and doing the maintenance on that. And again, I've got a great YouTube video that goes through that whole process. And like I mentioned earlier, the links to the videos in the description down below, you just click them and watch them and go from there. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. And great. How can we buy the softener and get the installation requested from a professional? So we sell the water softeners online, and what happens is we ship them to you. We offer free shipping and discount pricing. And in case you missed it earlier, this is where we're at. WaterEStore.com in the US, WaterEStore.ca in Canada. And like I say, we offer free shipping and discount pricing. And so typically, most folks would either do that, and then we have YouTube videos that show you how to do the installation if you're handy, if you have someone that's handy, or you can always hire a local plumber and they do the installation for you. Pretty much every single plumber that I've ever met has always installed a water softener at some point. So you can definitely do that, but definitely we can help you out with that. Al, I agree with Mike and Steve. Your videos are so helpful. We are very fortunate for you to do these for us, Gary. Well, you're very welcome, Al. That's what we do here. And like I say, if you can help spread the word, I appreciate that. Anytime you share my videos on Facebook or social media or something like that. And by the way, someone was asking me about social media the other day. And yes, we are on social media. And on Facebook or waterestore.ca in Canada or waterestore.us in the US. It's the same. It's exactly the same information that's presented on there. And an Instagram or at water_estore. And Josh, you keep saying that water softeners can take 1 part per million of iron. What if the iron is ferric, not ferrous? So ferric iron, for any of you folks that don't know what that is iron that's already oxidized. In other words, the iron is already colored. The water's already colored as it comes out of the faucet. Okay, and no, a water softener will not get rid of ferric iron. You need to have an iron filter for that. So so yeah, that's a situation where you'd still need an iron filter. But thanks for mentioning that, Josh. That's great. And okay, great. So let me get back here. Yeah, so great. Thanks very much for watching. I have over 400 YouTube videos out there. They're at Gary the Water Guy. That's my YouTube channel. And any questions or comments, add them down below. I do read every single one of them, and I answer as many of them as I can. And if you're looking for more water filtration videos, definitely check it out. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.